Good morning.
Good morning.
It's already Tuesday again. Amazingly, these days just keep coming.
What?
I know.
What to do about it?
What to do. It's how it works, I guess. We are taking our inspiration for Gratitude Tuesday today from something our friend, John, I'm going to try to say your last name. I've actually never heard your last name because our mutual friend just calls you Z. So I'm going to just go out on a limb and say John Zvirovsky, but I don't think that's right. Zvirovsky, I don't know. There's a lot of E's and a lot of stuff in that last name that makes it a little bit challenging, but whatever. John posted something on Facebook yesterday that Maz found and read to me from a site called Step Into Recovery. And the post-it note says, addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. And you were really struck by that.
I was.
So can you talk about that?
One thing, well, the first thing I should state is that is, in my humble opinion, 100% true. Even if you understand how when you understand how addiction works, it actually rewrites your personality. You lose interest in everything. It's one of the classic signs. You sometimes see these adverts for, is your child losing interest in homework, outdoor activities and everything? Because you do give up everything when you become addicted to something. One of our very learned friends said that, when she was on one Thursday, said, I'm not addicted to running, because if I was addicted to running, I'll put it above everything else. And
I was
addiction
thinking about Wendy today on this
you
too.
give up everything and put your addiction first. And when you are in recovery, you remember everything that you used to hold dear. And if you're lucky enough, you do recovery for everything because you get it back. And if you don't, then you know how to live with what you have, and you're grateful for that as well.
Oh, say more about that. That's interesting.
I was incredibly lucky because my marriage survived and actually got better. I know a lot of people whose marriage didn't survive, and even after 3 or 4 years of recovery, that this marriage began to dissolve. But people lost their job, but they got up on their feet. They started back again. They got another job, which was better for them. They actually. Some people said I went in there in the interview and I said, I got to the point when I said, one thing you should know about me is I'm a recovering alcoholic, and just laid it out. And about 90% of the time they actually got the job, and they said, right, I'm going to start from a point of no lying. That's what recovery is. I don't know if I'd do that.
I was just going to ask you, would you do that?
Well, I didn't lose my job, so...
Right, but, I mean, a simple Google search on you now and people would discover you're a recovering alcoholic, but would you own that in an interview?
I don't know if I would for a job. If I was
what kinds of other interviews do you have?
Well, if I was up for a promotion within the same institution, I would. If I was being interviewed for a newspaper or something, I probably would.
Sure. Because
that's part of who I am now, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah.
It's just part of my life now. So a lot of addicts run from things. So why start running from something you should be proud of? I am an alcoholic in recovery. And I do have regained, I have regained everything and more.
Yeah, I would say the more is the important part, because it's so much better now than it ever was before. But I think it's also important to note that it's better now for us because of lots of things, not just your sobriety. I mean, we're more financially stable, and not just because you got sober. Yeah. We are empty nesters, and our child is beautifully launched. We're at a really particularly sweet point in our lives.
Uh-huh.
And you got sober. I mean, this would not be a sweet time if you were not sober, but your sobriety...
It wouldn't mean as much.
No. And it would be almost impossible to recognize all of the other really good things because your alcoholism was like a wet blanket over everything. I mean, there just was no way to ever work around it. It pervaded every aspect of our lives. So, it's not that getting sober necessarily fixes everything, because if you get sober and you are unemployed, well, I doubt if you wake up and think, wow, I love unemployment sober. No, unemployment is hard, full stop. So I think it's important, because if you are watching this and you're struggling with an addiction and a number of other things, recovering from your addiction will absolutely make those other things more manageable, but it won't necessarily fix them. Our marriage saw a light at the end of the tunnel because you got sober, but we had to do work once you were sober to fix, repair, and restore and make better our marriage. Don't you agree?
Yeah, but that was only possible because I gave up drinking.
Absolutely. Yes. Which I think is...
Well, I didn't. Giving up drinking is a misnomer. I learned how to deal with my addiction to alcohol. And yes, it involves giving up drinking, but as I was told in rehab once, any idiot can be sober for a day. You just don't drink. Being sober for a long time because you want to, that's the difficult bit that you need to work on.
Well, we just watched a presentation from a guy named James Clear, who wrote a book called Atomic Habits that I just learned about this morning. So I know, if you don't know him, we know him for 9 minutes longer than you do. But he talks in this talk, and I'm going to get his book, and then maybe we'll talk about it at a different time. But he talked about the challenge being that when we say we want to make change in our lives, whatever it is, we look at the end goal. So I want to make more money. I want to make $100,000. Okay, we start from there, when actually what we need to do is start from, how do we make the change that puts us at the starting line, not the end line, because the end line might be years away. So you had to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe you can correlate this. If the goal is to not just be sober for one day, or not just to stop drinking for one day, that's the beginning of the goal. That's not the end goal.
You celebrate the goal. I had a ways to go before I realised I wanted to be sober, because
Well, you didn't really think you had a problem.
Yeah, I was in rehab for at least, it could be pushing on 2. How long was
I would bet a week and a half.
Yeah, before I actually realised that I needed help. So that was actually the start of my journey. That was my starting point, was celebrate the fact that I realised that I couldn't do this alone, and started listening.
So that's like 3 and a half or 4 weeks after alcohol was out of the system. So
that's when you celebrate the start. And it's also great. That's one of the many reasons why you get, you can celebrate sobriety birthdays and get a little coin. It's a celebration of a job well done.
I'm looking in my journal to see if I can see when you graduated. I
want to say March the 27th is when I graduated.
No, when you graduated from that high intensity to the next group. Oh, here we go. February 28th, because it was not a leap year. You downgraded to the lower level of care yesterday, and today you called me so down that you can't come home for 2 more weeks. So 28 days after he went into the hospital, he went from 2 weeks in the hospital to 2 weeks in rehab. So you were right, 2 weeks in high intensity rehab, and then down to low intensity, which was actually where you began to really see that you needed some serious help, because March 2nd is when I came to speak to your group. And that's when you and I met with Joanne, and
that was my turning point.
That was the turning point. So I would say March 2nd or 3rd, because I feel like I came to speak to your group, and then maybe I came the next day.
It was exactly a month.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank goodness. Susan, the nurse who gave me this, you just have no idea. She just posted, she was a traveling nurse from the South, and she just posted on Facebook yesterday or the day before that it was the anniversary of her husband dying. And the reason that I have this journal, and she wrote in it, is because this was her husband who died of cancer in 2015. She gave these journals out to people in his memory. And that's why I have this journal. And that's, from my perspective, you know, I've talked about this a lot. This was my AA. This was my therapy. This was my opportunity to say everything I needed to say with no judgment. I think our marriage survived from my end because of this. So thanks for that again, Susan. It's amazing. And you know, actually saying that, addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. I've talked a lot about this, but just because I didn't have the physical addiction didn't mean that I wasn't addicted to trying to solve Maz's addiction. It was kind of a thing for me, and I wouldn't say to you, oh, it made me feel good to scream at him. It made me feel good to sob at him, to badger him, to belittle him. It didn't make me feel good, but it made me feel powerful. It made me feel like maybe I was in control of this absolutely out of control environment. And so for me, recovery was giving up needing to feel like I was in control of this and just letting it go and seeing where it landed of its own accord, seeing what Maz could do, all independent of me. And then seeing what I was going to do independent of all of that anger and all of that despair. What was I going to do then in that moment? So it's so interesting to realize that I was an addict too.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never thought about that.
Well, it's a disease that affects entire family groups and groups of friends. It's not just a single person. Well, I mean, I suppose that's another hallmark of it being a disease. Every disease affects other people. I mean, living with someone with cancer is not easy either.
No, you've done it. I've done it. It's not easy. But that is less, you know, you can't save that person. I mean, a terminal cancer, you can try to make those end periods more comfortable. You can try to be, you know, more empathetic and more giving, but you can't beat it out of them.
No.
The way I believed I could kind of beat alcohol out of you. This has been an amazing daily dose for me. I mean, I have talked about other times where I have sort of gone through moments where I've thought, oh, I'm kind of going through the slump that Maz went through as the alcohol was leaving his body and all of that. But I've never really articulated that I was addicted to the power grab to control and fix this scenario. And I am a recovered power grabber in this instance. I probably have plenty of other places I need to work to recover my power situation, but that's for a different conversation. Anything else, Dr. Mary?
No, I think we should leave on a high note.
John, thank you so much for posting.
Yes.
We'll put the phrase up, but just remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. And I can only speak for myself, but being in recovery is just a much, much better place to be.
Oh, God, yes, absolutely.
Have a great Tuesday.
See you tomorrow.